Take a breath. Settle in. This one tightens slowly, and then, all at once. The building sits on the north edge of town, just past the last stoplight before the highway opens up. 3 stories, red brick, narrow windows with blinds that never quite close all the way. During the day, it is ordinary. Accounting firms, a law office, a medical billing company. At night, the second floor stays lit longer than the others. That is where she worked. Her name was Caroline Drexler, 31, senior accounts manager. Reliable, the kind of person who sent meeting reminders and always locked her office door when she left. On the night of October 14th, she did not leave. At least, not the way she was supposed to. The call came in just after 6 in the morning. Building maintenance, arriving for his Friday rounds, found her office door locked from the inside. The window was open, not broken. Open, fully raised, screen removed, leaning against the interior wall. Rain had soaked the carpet beneath the sill. Her coat was still on the back of her chair. Her purse was in the bottom desk drawer, wallet and keys inside. Her computer was asleep. Last activity logged at 11:47 the night before. She was gone. Listen to this part carefully. The window opens onto a narrow alley that runs between the building and a neighboring warehouse. The drop is roughly 20 feet to a concrete service lane below. No ladder. No fire escape on that side. No rope. No disturbance in the gravel at the base of the wall. Just wet pavement and a few scattered cigarette butts that had been there for weeks. The first responding officer stood in that office for a long time, looking at the window, then at the locked door, then back at the window. He radioed for a supervisor. Within 2 hours, the second floor was sealed. I got the case file 6 months later. By then, Caroline Drexler had been declared a missing person. No body, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play, technically. But the window kept pulling me back. I am a cold case researcher. I do not work for the department anymore, but I still have access. I take the cases that sit too long in filing cabinets, the ones where the active investigators have moved on. This one had been handed off 3 times. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the implication was clear. A locked office, an open window, a missing woman. Suicide seemed like the easy answer, except nothing about the scene made sense for that. I started with the building itself. 3 floors, 12 offices per floor, shared restrooms, and a small break room on each level. The front entrance locks automatically after 6. After hours, you need a key card to get in. The back entrance, the one near the alley, has the same setup. Keycard logs showed Caroline swiped in at 8:32 that morning. She did not swipe out. But here is the thing. 4 other people were in the building that night. 2 on the first floor, working late on a filing deadline. 1 on the 3rd floor, a lawyer prepping for a court appearance. And 1 other person on the 2nd floor, same hallway as Caroline. His name was David Milner. He ran a financial consulting practice out of the office, 3 doors down from hers. He told the first investigators he left around 10. Said he saw Caroline's light on when he walked past her door. But he did not stop to talk. He swiped out at the front entrance at 10:03. The logs confirmed it. So if Caroline was still working at 11:47, and Milner left over an hour earlier. That should be fine. Except when I pulled his keycard history for the prior 2 months, I found something no one had flagged. Milner swiped in and out of the building at predictable times, Monday through Thursday. But on Fridays, his swipe out times varied wildly. Sometimes 9, sometimes 11. Twice, he swiped out after midnight. On October 14th, he left early. I requested an interview. Milner agreed, but only over the phone. He said he was traveling for work. I recorded the call. He sounded calm, helpful even. He repeated the same story. He left at 10. He saw her light. He did not see anyone else. He did not hear anything unusual. When I asked why he left earlier than normal that night, he paused for just a second too long. Then, he said he had a headache. I let it sit. The second floor has no security cameras in the hallway. The building owner had planned to install them, but never followed through. The stairwell camera on the ground floor covers the entrance to the stairs, but not the landings. The parking lot camera faces the wrong direction. So we have keycard logs, and that is it. Except for one thing. The maintenance supervisor, a man named Ray Curran, mentioned in his original statement that he found something in the alley the morning Caroline disappeared. A small black keycard case, the kind people clip onto their belts or bags. It was sitting on top of a dumpster near the base of the building, below her window. Inside was a building keycard, not Caroline's. The name printed on the card was worn, but still legible. David Milner. Ray handed it over to the responding officer. It went into evidence. No one followed up. When I asked Ray about it later, he said he assumed Milner had dropped it earlier in the week and someone tossed it on the dumpster. But the card was dry when Ray found it. It had been raining all night. That is the clue object. A key card that should not have been there. I went back to the logs. Milner swiped out at 10:03 using his key card. If the card in the alley was his, then either he had a second card or someone else used his card to get back in after he left. Or the card was planted. Or he lied about leaving. I called the building manager and asked if employees were issued more than one card. She said no. One card per person. Replacements cost $50 and require a signed form. Milner had never requested a replacement. So I pulled his car registration and ran his plate through the parking lot footage from that night. His car, a dark blue sedan, entered the lot at 8:21 in the morning. It left at 10:04, 1 minute after he swiped out. That should close it, except his car came back. At 11:32, a dark blue sedan matching his plate entered the lot again. It parked in the same spot. The angle of the camera does not capture the driver's face, only the vehicle. At 12:16, the car left. Milner told investigators he went home after leaving the office. He said he did not return. When I asked him about the car on the recorded call, he hesitated again. Then he said his wife might have borrowed it. I asked for her contact information. He said she was out of the country. I checked. She was not. So now the timeline looks like this. Caroline is working alone on the second floor after 10. Milner's car returns to the lot at 11:32, 33 minutes before her computer goes to sleep. The car leaves 44 minutes later. By morning, her office is locked from the inside. The window is open, and Milner's keycard is in the alley below. And Caroline Drexler is gone. I started pulling everything I could find on Milner. Financial records, court filings, business history. His consulting practice had been struggling. 3 clients had filed complaints in the past year, claiming overbilling and missed deadlines. 1 case was still in arbitration. His expenses were high: rent on the office, lease on the car, mortgage on a house just outside town. His bank statements showed regular cash withdrawals, always on Fridays, usually late in the day. Amounts between $300 and $800. I could not find a clear motive for why Caroline would be a target. They worked in the same building, but there was no record of them working together. No shared clients, no known personal relationship. I asked her family if she had ever mentioned him. They said no. But then I found the email. It was buried in a backup of Caroline's work account, archived 3 weeks before she disappeared. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained a single sentence. "I know what you have been doing, and I have records." The recipient was David Milner. No reply. No follow-up. Just that one message, sent from her office computer at 9:15 on a Thursday night. I do not know what she had records of. The email does not say. But 3 weeks later, she was gone. I tried to get a warrant to search Milner's office. The district attorney said there was not enough. No body, no proof of a crime, just circumstantial links and a keycard that could have been lost innocently. The case stayed cold. But I kept working it. I interviewed the other people in the building that night. The 2 on the first floor, a paralegal and a junior associate, both said they left together around 9:30. They did not see Caroline. They did not see Milner. They did not hear anything unusual. The lawyer on the 3rd floor, a woman named Angela Rosen, said she worked until nearly 11. She remembered hearing footsteps in the stairwell around 10:45, but she assumed it was cleaning staff. When I told her the cleaning crew did not come until Saturday mornings, she went quiet. I asked if she could describe the footsteps. She said they were slow, deliberate, like someone was carrying something. She did not report it at the time because it did not seem important. Now, she said, it keeps her awake. I went back to the alley. I stood where Ray found the keycard and looked up at Caroline's window. From that angle, the drop is steep, but not impossible if you are desperate or if someone helps you. But there were no scuff marks on the brick, no damage to the windowsill, no signs of a struggle inside the office. Everything was orderly, neat. The only thing out of place was the open window and the wet carpet. Unless the window was opened after she was already gone. That is the theory I keep coming back to. Someone locked the door from the inside, opened the window, removed the screen, and left through another exit. It would explain why the door was locked. It would explain why there was no evidence of her climbing out. But it does not explain how they got out of a locked office or why they would stage it that way. Unless they had a key. Milner had a key card to the building, but office keys are different. Each tenant has their own lock. I checked with the building manager again. Caroline's office key was on her keyring, still in her purse. The manager has a master set, kept in a locked cabinet in the ground floor maintenance room. I asked if anyone else had access. She said only Ray Curran, the maintenance supervisor. I called Ray. He confirmed he has the only other set of masters. I asked if he had ever lent them out or left them unattended. He said no. Then he paused. He said there was one time, maybe 2 months before Caroline disappeared, when he left his keys on his card while he went to the restroom. He was gone less than 5 minutes. When he came back, the keys were still there. He did not think anything of it. I asked where his car was parked. He said 2nd floor, near the break room. Milner's office is 15 feet from the break room. I do not have proof, not yet, but the shape of this is getting clearer. Caroline sent an email accusing Milner of something. 3 weeks later, she is working late on a Friday night. Milner leaves the building at 10, but his car comes back 90 minutes later. His key card ends up in the alley. Her office is locked from the inside, window open, and she is gone. If Milner copied Ray's master key, he could have unlocked her office door from the hallway, entered while she was working, and done something that left no immediate trace. Then he locked the door from the inside, opened the window to make it look like she left that way, and exited using the master key again. He dropped his own key card in the alley to stage the scene further, making it look like she used it to get out, or like he had been there earlier and lost it innocently. But that does not explain the car coming back. If he left at 10 and his car returned at 11:32, either someone else was driving, or he came back after leaving on foot and retrieved the car later, or he never left at all. The timeline is tight, but it works. What I do not know is what happened to Caroline after that. If she is alive, no one has seen her. If she is not, I have no idea where to look. The rain that night was heavy, sustained, the kind that washes things away. If something was moved from that office to a vehicle in the alley, the rain would have erased most of the trace evidence. No footprints, no drag marks, just wet pavement and a dumpster and a key card that should not have been there. I requested Milner's cell phone records. The provider refused without a warrant. I do not have enough for a warrant. Not yet. But I am close. I can feel it tightening. The building is still there. Milner's office is still active. He still works late on Fridays. I have driven past the lot 3 times in the last 2 weeks. His car is always there, parked in the same spot. Last week, I saw him walking to his car just after midnight. He looked over his shoulder twice before getting in. He did not see me. I was parked across the street with my headlights off, watching. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time before starting the engine. Then he left. I do not know what he was waiting for, but I am going to find out. This case is not cold anymore. It is just waiting for the right pressure point. One more piece, one more crack in the story, and then it will break open. I have been doing this long enough to know when someone is lying. Milner is lying. The question is what he is lying about, and whether Caroline Drexler is still alive to tell her side. I do not think she is, but I am going to prove it. Next time I talk to Milner, it will not be on the phone. It will be in a room with a recorder running and no way out until he explains why his car came back, why his key card was in that alley, and what Caroline meant when she said she had records. I am going to find out what she knew, and I am going to find out what he did. The why started watching the building more closely. Not every night, but enough to establish a pattern. Milner kept regular hours Monday through Thursday, leaving between 9 and 10. But Fridays were different. Fridays, he stayed late, sometimes until 11, twice, past midnight. And on those nights, his behavior changed. He would walk to his car, pause at the door, look back at the building, then get in and sit there. Engine off, just sitting. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes longer. Then he would start the car and leave. Always the same route, north on Maple, west on the bypass, then out toward the industrial park where the road splits. I followed him once. He drove to a storage facility on the edge of town, the kind with rows of orange garage doors and security lights that flicker. He pulled up to Unit 217, unlocked the roll-up door, and backed his car inside. He was in there for 20 minutes. When he came out, he locked the door, got back in his car, and drove home. I ran the rental agreement. The unit was leased to a limited liability company registered in another state. The company had no website, no listed phone number, and only one officer on record, David Milner. I wanted to get inside that unit, but storage facilities have cameras, and I did not have legal access, so I waited. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Angela Rosen, the lawyer who had been working on the 3rd floor the night Caroline disappeared. She said she had been thinking about the footsteps she heard in the stairwell. She said she remembered something else. After the footsteps, maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, she heard a car door slam in the alley. Not the parking lot, the alley. She had not mentioned it before because she thought it was just someone taking out trash. But now, thinking back, it seemed wrong. The alley does not have parking. It is barely wide enough for a delivery truck. I asked her if she remembered the time. She said it was close to 11, maybe a few minutes before. That would line up with Milner's car returning to the lot at 11:32. If he parked in the alley first, did something, then moved the car to the lot, it would explain the gap. But why park in the alley at all? The lot is easier. Unless he did not want the car visible on the main lock camera during a specific window of time. I checked the alley access. There is a narrow service gate on the north side of the building, chained but not locked with a serious padlock. Bolt cutters would open it in seconds. If Milner drove in through that gate, he could have parked directly below Caroline's window, done whatever he needed to do, then driven back out and re-entered the main lot through the front entrance to make it look like a separate arrival. That would explain why the keycard was dry when Ray found it. It had not been sitting there all night. It had been placed there shortly before Milner left, after the heaviest rain had stopped. I pulled the weather data for that night. The rain peaked between 10:15 and 11:20. After 11:20, it tapered to a drizzle. By midnight, it had stopped. If Milner planted the keycard around 11:45, it would have been damp, but not soaked. By 6 in the morning, when Ray arrived, it would have dried enough to seem like it had been there for hours. The timing worked. I needed more. I needed something that would force the district attorney to move. So I started digging into Caroline's work. Her job was managing accounts for a mid-sized medical billing company. She reviewed invoices, tracked payments, flagged discrepancies, routine work, but detail-oriented, the kind of job where you notice if numbers do not line up. I requested her work files from her employer. They refused, citing confidentiality. I filed a formal records request through the state open records law. It took 3 weeks, but they finally released a redacted set of spreadsheets and correspondence. Most of it was routine. But buried in a folder labeled Archive, I found a memo Caroline had written to her supervisor 5 weeks before she disappeared. The memo detailed a pattern of irregularities in billing records submitted by an outside consultant the company had hired to review their accounts. The consultant had been paid over $40,000 in the prior 6 months. According to Caroline's analysis, several of the invoices contained charges for work that was never completed, and some of the line items were duplicates of services already billed by internal staff. The consultant's name was listed at the bottom of the memo: David Milner. Caroline had recommended an audit. Her supervisor had forwarded the memo to the company's compliance officer. There was no record of a response, no follow-up, no audit. I contacted the supervisor. She was reluctant to talk at first, but eventually she agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near her office. She looked tired. She said she remembered the memo. She said she had sent it up the chain and assumed someone was handling it. When I asked if she ever heard back, she said no. She said she asked about it once, a week after Caroline disappeared, and was told the matter had been resolved internally. I asked what that meant. She said she did not know. She said the compliance officer left the company 2 months later and no one replaced him. She said the whole thing made her uncomfortable, but she did not push it. She had a mortgage and 2 kids in school. I asked if she thought Milner knew about the memo. She said she did not know, but she said Caroline had been careful. She did not send accusations through email unless she had documentation to back it up. If Caroline sent that email to Milner, the one that said she had records, it meant she had proof of something. I asked where those records would be. The supervisor said Caroline kept physical files in her office. She said after Caroline disappeared, the company packed up her desk and put everything in storage. She did not know where. I called the company. They said the files had been destroyed per their retention policy. I asked when. They said 6 months after Caroline was declared missing. That was 3 weeks ago. Convenient. I went back to the email. I know what you have been doing, and I have records. Caroline sent it 3 weeks before she disappeared. If she had proof of billing fraud, proof that Milner was stealing from her employer, that was motive. $40,000 is not a fortune, but it is enough to ruin a reputation, enough to end a consulting business, enough to justify panic. If Milner knew Caroline was onto him, if he knew she had documentation, he would have needed to act before she escalated it further. Sending the email was a warning. Maybe she thought it would scare him into stopping. Maybe she thought he would negotiate. Instead, it might have backed him into a corner. 3 weeks later, she was gone. I needed to get into that storage unit. I could not do it legally, not without a warrant, and I still did not have enough for that. But I could watch it. So I started parking near the facility on Friday nights, waiting to see if Milner would show up. He did. 3 Fridays in a row. Same routine. Arrive around 11:30. back the car into the unit, stay inside for 15 to 20 minutes, lock up, leave. On the fourth Friday, I got there early and parked where I could see the unit but stay out of the security light range. I brought a camera with a long lens. When Milner arrived, I started shooting. He backed the car in as usual. This time, he left the roll-up door open while he worked. I could not see inside the unit clearly, but I could see him moving. He was wearing gloves. He pulled something out of the trunk. It looked like a plastic bin, the kind with a snap-on lid. He carried it deeper into the unit, out of my line of sight. A few minutes later, he came back empty-handed, closed the trunk, and pulled the door down. I got 3 clear shots of him entering the unit, one of him wearing gloves, one of the bin. It was not proof of anything illegal, but it was another piece. The next day, I contacted a private investigator I had worked with before, someone who specialized in asset searches and surveillance. I showed him the photos and explained the case. He said he could try to get a look inside the unit, but it would cost me. I said I would pay. 2 days later, he called. He said he had gotten in. No details on how, and I did not ask. He said the unit was about 10 by 15 feet. Metal shelves along the back wall, boxes stacked neatly, a few plastic bins, a filing cabinet. He took photos. When I saw them, my hands went cold. The filing cabinet had 4 drawers. The top drawer was labeled records. Inside were file folders organized by date. He had photographed the tabs. One of them was labeled Drexler. Another was labeled billing. A third was labeled compliance. The plastic bins were sealed, but one of them had a strip of packing tape across the lid with a handwritten date, October 15th, the day after Caroline disappeared. I do not know what is inside that bin, but I know it means something. I took the photos to the district attorney. I laid out the timeline, the email, the memo, the car returning to the lot, the key card in the alley, the storage unit, the filing cabinet, the bin with the date. The DA listened. Then he said it was all circumstantial. He said even if Milner had files labeled with Caroline's name, that did not prove he hurt her. It did not prove she was dead. It did not prove anything except that he kept records, which was not illegal. I said the bin was dated the day after she disappeared. He said that was interesting, but not enough. I asked what would be enough. He said a body, or a confession, or a witness. I did not have any of those. But I was not done. I went back to Ray Curran, the maintenance supervisor. I asked him if he remembered anything else about that morning, anything at all that seemed off. He thought for a while. Then he said there was one thing. He said when he unlocked the second-floor stairwell door that morning, he noticed the floor was wet. Not just near the door, but a trail leading down the hallway toward the offices, like someone had walked through with wet shoes. I asked if he reported it. He said no. He figured it was just tracked in rain. But now that he thought about it, the trail led toward Caroline's office, not away from it. I asked if he had taken any photos. He said no. By the time the police arrived, he had already mopped it up. He said he did not think it mattered. It mattered. If someone had entered the building with wet shoes, and walked toward Caroline's office. That supported the theory that Milner came back inside after parking in the alley. It also meant he had been outside in the rain long enough to get soaked. If he had been moving something from her office to his car, that would explain it. But again, it was not proof. Just another piece that fit. I decided to go back to the building myself. I wanted to walk the route. I wanted to see what Milner would have seen that night. So I went on a Friday, late, after the offices had cleared out. I parked in the lot and walked to the alley gate. It was still chained, still easy to open. I walked down the alley to the spot below Caroline's window. I stood there and looked up. From that angle, the window is high, but accessible if you have a ladder. There was no ladder in the alley that night, but Milner could have brought one in his car. He could have placed it against the wall, climbed up, opened the window from the outside, removed the screen, then taken the ladder back down and put it in his car before moving to the main lot. But why? Why go through all that trouble to make it look like she climbed out a window if she was already gone? Unless he needed time. If Caroline was still alive when he entered her office, if there was a confrontation, if something happened that he had not planned, he would need to buy time to figure out what to do next. Staging the scene to look like she left on her own, or like she jumped, would slow down the investigation. It would create confusion. It would make people assume she was suicidal or ran away. It would keep the focus off him. And it worked. For 6 months, no one looked at him seriously. The case went cold. It was only when I started pulling threads that the shape of it became visible. I walked back to the parking lot and sat in my car. I looked up at the second floor windows. Most of them were dark. One was still lit. I could see a shadow moving inside. I checked the time. It was 11:40. I waited. At midnight, the light went off. 5 minutes later, David Milner walked out of the building. He did not look around this time. He walked straight to his car, got in, and left. I followed him. Same route. North on Maple, west on the bypass, out toward the storage facility. He pulled up to Unit 217, unlocked the door, backed the car in, and closed the door behind him. I parked across the street and waited. 23 minutes later, the door rolled up. Milner got back in his car and drove away. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I walked over to the unit. The lock was back in place. I put my hand on the door. It was cold. I do not know what he does in there for 20 minutes every week, but I know it is connected. I know it matters. I just have to prove it. The next step is to get someone to flip. Someone who knows something. Someone who saw something and did not realize it was important. I started going through the list of people who worked in the building around the time Caroline disappeared. Most of them are still there. A few have moved on. One name kept coming up in the tenant directory, but never in any of the interviews. A woman named Stephanie Lowell. She ran a graphic design business out of a small office on the second floor, 2 doors down from Milner. She was listed as a tenant from March through November of that year. But there is no record of police ever talking to her. No statement, no contact information in the file. I tracked her down through her business website. She had moved her office to a co-working space downtown. I called and asked if I could meet with her to ask a few questions about the building. She hesitated, then agreed. We met at her new office. She was in her mid-30s, calm, professional. I explained who I was and why I was asking. She said she remembered Caroline. She said they had talked a few times in the break room, mostly small talk. She said Caroline seemed nice, quiet, focused. I asked if she remembered the night Caroline disappeared. She said she was not in the office that night. She had been out of town for a client meeting. She did not get back until Saturday. I asked if she remembered anything unusual in the weeks before. She thought for a moment. Then she said there was one thing. She said about a month before Caroline disappeared, she had stayed late to finish a project. It was a Thursday, maybe 9 or 9:30 at night. She was walking to the restroom and she heard voices in the hallway. 2 people, talking in low tones. She could not make out the words, but the tone was tense. She glanced down the hall and saw 2 people standing outside Caroline's office. One of them was Caroline. The other was a man. I asked if she recognized the man. She said she thought it was the guy from the financial office. She did not know his name, but she had seen him around. I showed her a photo of Milner. She nodded. She said that was him. I asked what happened. She said they talked for a minute or 2. Then Caroline went back into her office and closed the door. Milner stood there for a few seconds, then walked back toward his office. Stephanie said she did not think much of it at the time. She figured it was just work stuff. I asked if Caroline seemed upset. Stephanie said she could not tell, but she said Milner looked frustrated. She said he kept running his hand through his hair, the way people do when they are stressed. It was not much, but it placed Milner and Caroline together, alone, having a tense conversation a month before she disappeared. It was another link. I asked Stephanie why she never gave a statement to the police. She said no one ever asked. She said she did not even know there had been an investigation until months later, and by then, she had moved offices and assumed it was handled. I thanked her and left. I added her statement to my file. It was another piece. Still not enough for the DA, but enough to keep tightening the circle. I decided to try one more approach. I called Milner directly. I told him I was working on a story about unsolved disappearances in the area and wanted to ask him a few follow-up questions. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he had already talked to the police and did not have anything to add. I said I understood, but I had some new information and thought he might be able to help clarify a few details. He asked what kind of information. I said I had spoken to several people who remembered seeing him and Caroline together in the weeks before she disappeared. I said I also had some questions about his storage unit. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said he did not know what I was talking about. I said I had photos. I said I had witness statements. I said I thought it would be better if we talked in person so he could explain his side. He hung up. I expected that, but now he knows I am close. Now he knows someone is watching. And people make mistakes when they feel pressure. I just have to wait for his 2 days after I called Milner. His car stopped showing up at the storage facility on Fridays. I watched for 3 weeks straight. Nothing. He had changed his pattern, which meant he knew he was being watched. Or he had moved whatever he was keeping there. I contacted the storage facility manager and asked if Unit 217 was still active. She said yes, still leased, rent paid through the end of the year. I asked if she had seen the tenant recently. She said no, not in a few weeks. I asked if she would be willing to let me know if he showed up. She said she could not do that, privacy policy. I thanked her and hung up. But the next afternoon, she called me back. She said she had been thinking about it and something had been bothering her. She said about 2 weeks earlier, late at night, she had been closing up the office when she saw someone at Unit 217. Not Milner, someone else. A woman. She said the woman had a key and let herself in. She was inside for maybe 10 minutes, then left. The manager said she thought it was strange because the lease was only in Milner's name, but she assumed it was his wife or a business partner. I asked if she could describe the woman. She said mid-30s, dark hair, average height, wearing a long coat. She said it was dark and she did not get a great look. I asked if she saw what kind of car the woman was driving. She said a small grey SUV, maybe a Honda or a Toyota. She did not get the plate. I asked if the woman took anything out of the unit. The manager said she did not think so. She said the woman walked out empty-handed, locked the door and left. That opened a new thread. If Milner had given someone else access to the unit, it meant he trusted them. It also meant whatever he was hiding, someone else knew about it. I started looking into Milner's personal life. He was married, no kids. His wife's name was Jenna. I found her on social media. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed a woman in her late 30s with light brown hair, not dark. So unless she had changed her appearance significantly, the woman at the storage unit was not his wife. I pulled his business records again and cross-referenced his known associates. There were a few names that came up repeatedly. One was a woman named Liz Howell. She worked as an administrative assistant for an accounting firm on the first floor of the same building where Milner and Caroline had their offices. She had been there for years. According to the tenant directory, she was still there. I found a photo of her online, tagged in a group picture from a local charity event. Dark hair, mid-30s. It was hard to say for certain, but it could have been the same woman. I decided to approach her carefully. I did not want to spook her the way I had spooked Milner. So I went to the building on a weekday afternoon and waited in the lobby until I saw her leave for lunch. I followed her to a sandwich shop 2 blocks away. She ordered, sat down by the window, and started scrolling through her phone. I walked in, ordered, and sat at the table next to hers. I waited a few minutes, then I turned and asked if she had the time. She looked up, told me, and went back to her phone. I thanked her, then hesitated like I had just recognized her. I said, "You work in the building on Maple, right? 2nd floor?" She looked at me more carefully. She said no, 1st floor. I said, "Oh, sorry. I must be thinking of someone else. I used to have a meeting there once in a while." Then I asked, casually, "Do you remember that woman who disappeared from the 2nd floor a while back?" Her expression changed, just slightly. She said yes, she remembered. I said it was such a strange case. I said I always wondered what happened. She did not say anything. I said I heard the police never really figured it out. She nodded, still quiet. Then she said, "Why are you asking?" I told her the truth. I said I was a researcher working cold cases, and I had been looking into Caroline Drexler's disappearance. I said I was trying to understand the timeline and who was in the building that night. I said her name had come up in the tenant records, and I was wondering if she remembered anything. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she was not there that night. She said she left early that day, around 4. She said she did not know anything. I said that was fine, I was just trying to be thorough. Then I asked, "Do you know David Milner?" Her face went still. She said she knew who he was. I asked if they had ever worked together. She said no. I asked if she had ever been to his storage unit. She stood up. She said she did not know what I was talking about, and she did not want to be involved. She picked up her sandwich, walked out, and did not look back. That told me everything I needed to know. I followed up with the storage facility manager again. I asked if she could pull the access logs for Unit 217, just to see how many times it had been opened in the past 6 months. She said she did not have access to that level of detail, but she could ask the security company. A week later, she called me back. She said the unit had been accessed 42 times since April. Most of the entries were on Friday nights between 10 and midnight, but there were 6 entries on other days, scattered throughout the months. 3 of those entries were in the middle of the day. 1 was on a Sunday morning. I asked if the logs showed who accessed the unit. She said no, just the time and date. Anyone with a key could open it. There was no ID verification unless you went through the main office. That meant Milner had given someone a copy of the key, and that person had been going to the unit independently. If it was Liz Howell, the question was why? What was she doing there? Was she helping him hide something? Was she moving something? Or was she checking to make sure it was still there? I needed to know what was in that unit. I had photos of the filing cabinet and the plastic bins, but I did not have details. I could not get a warrant without more evidence, and I could not get more evidence without access. I was stuck in a loop, so I decided to take a risk. I contacted Jenna Milner, David's wife. I found her work email through a professional directory and sent her a brief, carefully worded message. I said I was researching a case that might involve her husband's business, and I wanted to give her the opportunity to provide context before I published anything. I did not mention Caroline directly. I did not mention the storage unit. I just said I had some questions and would appreciate a conversation. She replied 2 hours later. She said she did not know what I was talking about, and if I had questions about her husband's business, I should contact him directly. Then she said something that caught my attention. She said, "Whatever you think you know, you are wrong." Not "I do not know anything," not "leave us alone." She said I was wrong, which meant she knew what I was asking about, even though I had not been specific. I replied and asked if we could meet in person. I said it would only take a few minutes and it might clear up some misunderstandings. She did not reply. But the next day, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Jenna. She said she would meet me, but only in a public place and only for 10 minutes. She said if I tried to record the conversation or bring anyone else, she would leave immediately. We met at a park near the river. It was a grey afternoon, cold wind coming off the water. She was waiting on a bench near the walking path. She looked tired. She did not stand up when I arrived. I sat down next to her and said thank you for meeting me. She said, "What do you want?" I said I wanted to understand what happened to Caroline Drexler. I said I had been researching the case for months, and everything kept pointing back to her husband. I said I was not trying to ruin anyone's life. I just wanted the truth. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My husband did not hurt that woman." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because I know him." She said, "David makes mistakes. He is not perfect, but he would never do something like that." She said people were trying to make him look guilty because it was easier than admitting they did not know what happened. I said, "Then help me understand." I said, "Why did his car come back to the building that night? Why was his key card in the alley? Why does he have a storage unit full of files with Caroline's name on them?" She stared at me. She said, "How do you know about the storage unit?" I said, "I have been watching it." I said, "I know he goes there every Friday. I know someone else has a key." I said, "If there is an innocent explanation, now is the time to tell me." She looked away. She said, "You do not understand." She said, "David was trying to protect himself." She said, "Caroline was threatening him. She said she was going to ruin his business over a misunderstanding. She said David kept records to prove she was wrong, but by the time he could show anyone, she was gone." I said, "What misunderstanding?" Jenna hesitated. Then she said, "Caroline accused him of overbilling. She said she claimed he was charging for work he did not do. She said it was not true. She said David did the work, he just did not document it the way Caroline wanted. She said it was a paperwork issue, not fraud." I said, "Then why did he not just show her the documentation?" Jenna said, "He tried. She said Caroline would not listen. She said she was convinced he was stealing, and she told him she was going to report him. She said David panicked. He said he needed time to organize his records to prove she was wrong. But before he could, she disappeared." I said, "And the storage unit?" Jenna said, "That is where he keeps his business files." She said he moved them there because he was worried someone would break into his office. She said he did not trust the building security after Caroline disappeared. I said, "Who else has a key?" Jenna said, "No one, just him." I said, "That is not true. Someone else has been going to that unit. A woman, dark hair, mid-30s. She was there 2 weeks ago." Jenna's face changed. She said, "I do not know who that is." But I could see she was lying. I said, "Is it Liz Howell?" Jenna stood up. She said, "I do not know that name." She said, "This conversation is over." She started walking away. I called after her. I said, "If your husband did not hurt Caroline, then help me find out who did." She did not stop. She just kept walking until she disappeared around the curve of the path. I sat there for a while, thinking. Jenna knew more than she was saying. She knew about the storage unit. She knew someone else had access. And when I mentioned Liz Howe's name, she panicked. That meant Liz was involved. And if Liz was involved, she might know what happened to Caroline. I decided to go back to the building and try to talk to Liz again. But when I got there, her office was empty. I asked the receptionist if she was out for the day. The receptionist said no. Liz had quit. She said it was sudden. She said Liz had come in 2 days earlier, cleaned out her desk, and left. She did not give notice. She just said she was done and walked out. 2 days earlier, the same day I had approached her at the sandwich shop. I asked if anyone knew where she went. The receptionist said no. She said Liz had not left a forwarding address or a phone number. She said the office manager was frustrated because Liz had been in the middle of several projects. I asked if I could see her desk. The receptionist said it had already been cleared and reassigned. I asked if there was anything left behind. She said no. Liz took everything. I went outside and called the private investigator I had worked with before. I asked if he could track down Liz Howell. I gave him her name, her last known address, and her vehicle description. He said he would see what he could find. 3 days later, he called me back. He said Liz had not been at her apartment in over a week. Her car was gone. Her mail was piling up. Her neighbors said they had not seen her. He said it looked like she had left in a hurry. I asked if he could find any other addresses tied to her name. He said he found one. A rental property about 90 miles north, near the state line. It was listed under her name, leased 6 months earlier. He said. He drove by. The lights were off. The driveway was empty, but there were fresh tire tracks in the gravel. I asked if he could get inside. He said, not legally, but he said he could watch the place and let me know if anyone showed up. I told him to do it. 2 days later, he called. He said someone had been there. A man, late 30s, dark coat. He had arrived around midnight, let himself in with a key, stayed for about an hour, then left. The investigator got a photo of the license plate. It was registered to David Milner. So now I knew. Milner and Liz were working together. They had a rental property 90 miles away. They had access to the storage unit. And Liz had disappeared right after I started asking questions. The shape of this was becoming clear. Milner and Liz were hiding something. Whether it was evidence or something worse, I did not know. But the fact that they were both running meant they were scared. I took everything I had back to the district attorney. I laid out the new information, the storage unit, the rental property, Liz's sudden disappearance, Milner's late night visit, the access logs, Jenna's reaction, the witness who saw them arguing. The DA listened. Then he said it still was not enough. He said I had circumstantial connections, but no direct evidence of a crime. He said even if Milner and Liz were having an affair, even if they were hiding business records, that did not prove they heard Caroline. He said I needed something concrete, a confession, a body, physical evidence. I said, what about the bin? He said, what bin? I showed him the photo. The plastic bin in the storage unit, labeled with the date October 15th. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, you do not know what is inside. I said, that is why we need a warrant. He said, I cannot get a warrant based on a photo of a closed bin. I said, what if I could prove Milner was at the building the night Caroline disappeared, after he claimed he left? The DA said, how? I said, give me 1 more week. He said he would think about it, but I could tell he was not convinced. I did not have a week to waste. So I went back to the building manager and asked if I could review the original security footage from the night Caroline disappeared. She said the footage had been turned over to the police months ago, and the system only kept recordings for 90 days. After that, it was automatically deleted. I asked if the police had made a copy. She said she did not know. I went to the police department and requested the footage under a public records request. They said it was part of an open investigation and could not be released. I said the case had been cold for months. They said it was still technically open. I filed a formal appeal. It would take weeks. I did not have weeks. So I went back to Angela Rosen, the lawyer who had been on the 3rd floor that night. I asked if she still had access to her office security system. She said yes. Her firm kept their own cameras in the hallways and stairwells, separate from the building system. I asked if the recordings from that night still existed. She said she did not know, but she could check. 2 days later, she called. She said she found something. She said her firm's system kept backups for a year, and the footage from October 14th was still archived. She said she pulled the stairwell camera from that night. She said I needed to see it. We met at her office after hours. She pulled up the footage on her computer. The camera was mounted at the top of the 3rd floor stairwell, angled down toward the landing. The timestamp showed October 14th, 10:41 in the evening. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then a figure appeared at the bottom of the frame, walking up the stairs from the 2nd floor. The person was moving slowly, carefully. They reached the landing, paused, then continued up toward the 3rd floor, out of frame. Angela paused the video. She said, "Watch this part." She rewound and played it again. This time, I focused on the figure. It was a man, dark coat, medium build. The angle did not show his face clearly, but I could see enough. It was Milner. The timestamp said 10:41. Milner had swiped out of the building at 10:03. According to his statement, he went home. But here he was, 38 minutes later, walking up the stairwell from the 2nd floor. Angela fast-forwarded. At 11:07, the same figure came back down the stairs, moving faster this time. He disappeared out of frame, heading toward the 2nd floor. She paused it again. She said, "I did not realize this was here until I went looking." She said the camera does not cover the 2nd floor hallway, but it shows anyone using the stairs. She said Milner must have come back into the building after he left, gone to the 2nd floor, stayed there for about 25 minutes, then left again through the stairwell. I asked if the camera showed him leaving the building. She said no, the camera only covers the 3rd floor landing. But she said the timing matches what I remembered hearing. She said the footsteps she heard were around 10:45. The figure on the camera appeared at 10:41. I asked if I could have a copy of the footage. She said yes. She burned it onto a USB drive and handed it to me. I took it straight to the district attorney. I did not call ahead. I just walked into his office and put the drive on his desk. I said, "This is Milner." He said he left at 10. He lied. He came back. He was on the 2nd floor. He was there when Caroline disappeared. The DA watched the footage 3 times. Then he picked up his phone and called the police chief. He said, "I think we have enough." The warrant was issued the next morning. 2 for the storage unit, 1 for Milner's office, 1 for the rental property up north, and 1 for Milner's home. The police moved fast. They did not want to give him time to destroy anything. I was not allowed to be present during the searches, but the lead detective, a man named Carver, agreed to keep me updated. He said it was the least he could do, considering I had handed him the case on a platter. He did not sound happy about it. He sounded like someone who had missed something obvious and was trying not to admit it. The storage unit was searched first. I got the call around noon. Carver said they found the filing cabinet. Inside were business records, invoices, contracts, correspondence. One entire drawer was labeled with Caroline's name. The files contained copies of the billing documents she had flagged, along with handwritten notes in the margins. Milner's handwriting. The notes were defensive, justifying charges, explaining decisions, calculating totals. It looked like he had been preparing a rebuttal to her accusations. But that was not the important part. The important part was the plastic bin. Carver said they opened it. Inside were Caroline's personal belongings. Her jacket, the one that had been hanging on the back of her office chair the morning she disappeared. Her scarf, her laptop bag, a pair of shoes, and her phone. Her phone. The one that had last pinged a tower 3 miles south of the building at 11:52. On the night she disappeared. Carver said the phone was powered off, but the forensics team was working on it. He said if they could pull the data, it might show where she went, who she talked to, what happened in those final hours. I asked about the other bins. He said they were still going through them. One contained more files, another contained cleaning supplies, bleach, trash bags, rubber gloves, paper towels, all unopened, still in their original packaging. Carver said it looked like someone had bought them but never used them, or they had been staged to look unused. I asked if they found anything else. He said they found a rolled up tarp in the back corner, still in its plastic wrapper. He said it was the heavy duty kind, the kind you use for construction or moving. He said it had never been opened, but the receipt was still attached. It was dated October 13th, the day before Caroline disappeared. I asked where it was purchased. He said a hardware store 2 miles from the building. He said they were pulling the security footage from the store to see who bought it. The search of Milner's office turned up more files, but nothing immediately incriminating. His computer was seized. Carver said they were imaging the hard drive and would go through it line by line. The rental property up north was empty. No furniture, no personal belongings, just a few pieces of mail addressed to Liz Howell and some muddy footprints in the front hall. Carver said it looked like someone had been using it as a temporary stop, not a residence. He said they were processing the scene for prints and trace evidence, but it would take time. Milner's home was the last search. Carver said Milner was there when they arrived. He did not resist. He did not say anything. He just stood in the driveway with his arms crossed while they went through the house. His wife, Jenna, was inside. Carver said she was cooperative, but visibly shaken. She kept asking what they were looking for. They did not tell her. They found more files in Milner's home office. They found a second laptop. They found a lockbox in the bedroom closet. Inside the lockbox was $10,000 in cash, bundled in hundreds. There was also a handwritten list of dates and locations. Carver said the dates went back 6 months. Some of them matched the access logs from the storage unit. Others were new. One of the dates was October 14th. Next to it was a time, 11:30, and a single word, handle. Carver said they arrested Milner on the spot. He was charged with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and suspicion of involvement in Caroline Drexler's disappearance. They read him his rights. He did not say a word. He just asked for a lawyer. Jenna stood in the doorway and watched them take him away. Carver said she did not cry. She just stood there, staring, like she was trying to make sense of something that did not fit. Liz Howe was still missing. An arrest warrant was issued. Her photo was sent to state police, border patrol, and neighboring jurisdictions. Carver said if she tried to cross state lines, they would find her. But so far, nothing. The next day, the forensics team finished pulling data from Caroline's phone. Carver called me and asked if I could come to the station. He said there was something I needed to hear. I met him in a small conference room. He had a laptop open on the table. He said the phone had been wiped remotely on the night of October 14th at 11:54, 2 minutes after it last pinged the tower. He said whoever wiped it knew what they were doing. They used a remote access app that required a password and two-factor authentication. I asked if they could recover anything. He said yes. The wipe had not been complete. The forensics team was able to pull fragments of text messages, call logs, and app data from the phone's backup partition. One of the recovered text threads was between Caroline and an unknown number. The messages were brief, terse. The thread started 3 days before Caroline disappeared. The first message, from Caroline, "We need to talk. In person." The response, "Not a good time. Caroline, this cannot wait." Response, "I will call you." Caroline, "No. Face to face. Friday night. My office. 9. Response, "Fine." Carver said the unknown number was a burner phone, purchased with cash, activated 2 weeks before Caroline disappeared, and deactivated 2 days after. It pinged towers near the building on the night of October 14th. The last ping was at 11:41, right around the time the stairwell camera showed Milner walking up from the second floor. I asked if they could trace the burner to Milner. Carver said not directly. But the purchase location was a convenience store 4 blocks from Milner's home. The store had security footage from the date of purchase. It showed a woman buying the phone. Dark hair, mid-30s. The footage was grainy, but the investigator, who had been watching the rental property, said it looked like Liz Howe. So Liz bought the phone, Milner used it, and Caroline arranged to meet whoever had that number on the night she disappeared. Carver said there was more. He pulled up another file. He said the forensics team also recovered a voice memo from Caroline's phone. It was recorded at 10:53 on the night of October 14th, 38 minutes before the phone was wiped. He played it. The audio was muffled, like the phone had been in a pocket or a bag. But you could hear voices. 2 people, a man and a woman. The woman's voice, tense, controlled. "I told you I have copies. You cannot make this go away by intimidating me." The man's voice, lower, harder to make out. "You do not understand what you are doing. This is not just about me." The woman, "Then tell me who else. Tell me who you are protecting." The man, I cannot do that. The woman. Then I go to the state compliance board on Monday. I already have the filing ready. A pause. Then the man's voice, quieter, almost pleading, Caroline, please, just give me until the end of the month. I can fix this. The woman, you have had months. Another pause. Then a sound. A scrape, like a chair being pushed back. The man, do not walk away from me. The woman, this conversation is over. Footsteps, a door opening, then a loud thud, like something heavy hitting the floor. A gasp. Silence. The recording continued for another 20 seconds. You could hear breathing, movement, then the sound of a door closing. Then nothing. The recording ended. Carver stopped the playback. He said, "That is Caroline Drexler's voice." We matched it to a recording from a work presentation she gave 6 months earlier. The man's voice is harder to confirm, but the speech patterns and phrasing match samples we pulled from Milner's voicemail greetings and a recorded deposition he gave 2 years ago. I asked what the thud was. Carver said they did not know for certain, but the forensics team analyzed the audio waveform. They said it was consistent with a person falling or being pushed to the ground. The gasp that followed suggested impact, possibly a head injury. I said, "So he pushed her?" Carver said, "Or she fell. Or there was a struggle and it went wrong. We do not know. But what we do know is that something happened in that office, and 38 minutes later, her phone was wiped, and she was gone." I asked if the recording was enough to charge him with murder. Carver said not yet. He said they still did not have a body. Without a body, the case was harder to prove. But the recording, combined with the evidence from the storage unit and the stairwell footage, was enough to hold him while they continued the investigation. I asked what happened next. Carver said they were waiting for the forensics reports from the rental property and Milner's home. He said they were also trying to locate Liz Howell. He said once they found her, they would have a better picture. 2 days later, they found her. She was pulled over for a broken taillight just outside the state line. The officer ran her plates and saw the warrant. She was arrested without incident. She was brought back and held in a separate facility from Milner. Carver said she asked for a lawyer immediately and refused to answer any questions. But her lawyer was smart. He knew the evidence was stacking up. He knew Liz was facing serious charges, so he made a deal. Liz agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity from prosecution for anything related to Caroline's disappearance. The DA agreed on the condition that her testimony was truthful and complete. Carver called me the day after the deal was finalized. He said Liz had given a full statement. He said I was not going to like it, but I needed to hear it. We met at the station again. This time, he had a transcript of Liz's statement. He handed it to me and said, "Read it first. Then we will talk." I read it. Liz's statement was detailed, methodical. She said she had been in a relationship with Milner for 8 months. She said it started as a professional friendship and became something more. She said Milner's marriage was falling apart and she was lonely, and it just happened. She said she knew it was wrong, but she did not stop it. She said Milner had told her about Caroline's accusations. He said Caroline was trying to ruin him over a misunderstanding. He said he needed time to gather evidence to prove she was wrong. He said he was keeping files in a storage unit to protect them in case Caroline tried to break into his office. Liz said she believed him. She said she helped him organize the files. She said she went to the storage unit several times to drop off documents or pick up records he needed. She said she did not think anything of it. Then came the night of October 14th. Liz said Milner called her around 9 that evening. He said he needed her help. He said Caroline had agreed to meet with him to discuss the accusations, but he was afraid she was going to record the conversation and twist his words. He said he needed Liz to be nearby in case things went wrong. Liz said she drove to the building and parked in the alley. She said Milner had told her to wait in her car and keep her phone on. She said she sat there for over an hour. She said it was raining hard and she could barely see anything. At 10:56, Milner called her. He said there had been an accident. He said Caroline had fallen and hit her head. He said she was unconscious. He said he did not know what to do. Liz said she panicked. She said she told him to call an ambulance. He said he could not. He said if he called for help, Caroline would wake up and accuse him of attacking her. He said his career would be over. He said he needed Liz to help him move her somewhere safe until she woke up. Liz said she went up to the second floor using the back stairwell. She said Milner met her in the hallway. He looked terrified. She said he took her into Caroline's office. Caroline was lying on the floor near her desk. She was not moving. There was blood on the floor near her head. Liz said she checked for a pulse. She said Caroline was alive, but her breathing was shallow. She said she told Milner they had to call for help. He refused. He said if they called, he would go to prison. He said Caroline had been threatening him for weeks. He said the police would never believe it was an accident. Liz said Milner convinced her to help him move Caroline to his car. He said they would take her somewhere and leave her where she would be found. He said once she woke up, she would not remember what happened. He said it would all be fine. Liz said she helped him carry Caroline down the back stairwell. She said they put her in the trunk of Milner's car. She said Caroline was still breathing. She said Milner told her to go home and not tell anyone. He said he would handle it. He said he would call her when it was over. Liz said she left. She said she went home and waited. She said Milner called her 3 hours later. He said it was handled. He said Caroline was gone and no one would find her. He said Liz needed to forget everything that happened. He said if she ever told anyone, they would both go to prison. Liz said she tried to forget. She said she went to the storage unit a few times after that to check on the files. She said Milner had moved Caroline's belongings there. He said he needed to keep them in case the police ever searched his office or his home. He said it was safer that way. She said when I started asking questions, Milner told her to disappear for a while. He said he would take care of everything. She said she rented the property up north and stayed there. She said Milner came to see her twice. She said he told her the police were getting close. He said if they found her, she should not say anything. He said they did not have enough evidence to prove anything. But Liz said she could not live with it anymore. She said she had nightmares. She said every time she closed her eyes, she saw Caroline's face. She said when the police arrested her, she felt relieved. She said she wanted to tell the truth. She said she wanted it to be over. The statement ended there. I looked up at Carver. I said, "She helped him move a dying woman into a trunk and then went home." Carver nodded. He said, "And then she got immunity for it." I said, "Where is Caroline?" He said, "We do not know yet." But Liz agreed to show us. The next day, Liz led investigators to a location 40 miles south of the city. It was a rural area, mostly farmland, with patches of woods and gravel access roads. Liz directed them to a narrow dirt path that led into a small clearing surrounded by trees. She said Milner had told her this was where he took Caroline. She said he told her he left her there because it was far enough away that no one would connect it to him, but close enough that someone would eventually find her. The search team spent 2 days combing the area. They used ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and thermal imaging. On the third day, they found something. It was a shallow grave, covered with branches and leaves. The soil had been disturbed recently, within the past few months. They excavated carefully. 3 feet down, they found her. Caroline Drexler. She was wrapped in a tarp, the same kind that had been purchased the day before she disappeared. The autopsy confirmed her identity through dental records. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, followed by asphyxiation. The medical examiner said she had likely been unconscious, but still alive when she was placed in the trunk. She said Caroline had died sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning on October 15th. She said if she had received medical attention, she probably would have survived. Carver called me after the autopsy results came in. He said, "Milner killed her. Maybe he did not mean to. Maybe it started as an accident. But when he put her in that trunk and drove her out to the woods and buried her, that was murder." Milner was charged with second-degree murder, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. His lawyer tried to argue that it was an accident, that Milner had panicked and made a terrible mistake. The DA said it did not matter. He said Milner had a dozen opportunities to call for help. He chose not to. He chose to hide her. He chose to bury her. The trial took 4 months. I attended every day. I sat in the back row and listened to the evidence, the stairwell footage, the voice recording, Liz's testimony, the forensics reports, the autopsy, the timeline. The defense tried to paint Caroline as unstable, as someone who had been harassing Milner, as someone who had caused her own death by escalating a situation that did not need to escalate. They tried to suggest that she had attacked Milner first, that he had only defended himself, that the fall was accidental. But the prosecution had the recording. They had Caroline's voice, calm and controlled, telling Milner the conversation was over. They had the thud, the gasp, the silence. They had the evidence that Milner had purchased a tarp the day before. They had the fact that he moved her body, wiped her phone, staged her office, and buried her in the woods. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found him guilty on all counts. Milner was sentenced to 35 years without the possibility of parole. Liz Howell kept her immunity deal, but the DA made it clear that she would have to live with what she did for the rest of her life. She moved out of state. I do not know where. I do not care. Jenna Milner filed for divorce 2 weeks after the verdict. She released a brief statement through her lawyer. She said she had been deceived, that she had no knowledge of her husband's actions, and that she hoped Caroline's family could find some measure of peace. Caroline's family held a small memorial service after the trial ended. They buried her in a cemetery near where she grew up. I was invited, but I did not go. I did not feel like I belonged there. I had found the answers, but I had not brought her back. The case is closed now, officially, but I still think about it. I think about the window that was left open to make it look like she had climbed out. I think about the key card in the alley. I think about the locked door and the wet carpet and the footsteps in the stairwell. I think about the moment when Milner realized what he had done, and instead of calling for help, he called Liz. I think about the choice he made, the choice that turned an accident into a murder. And I think about Caroline, working late on a Friday night, trying to do the right thing, trying to hold someone accountable. I think about the email she sent. I know what you have been doing, and I have records. She was right. She did have records. And in the end, those records were part of what brought him down. But it did not save her. Nothing could. That is the thing about these cases. You can solve them. You can find the answers. You can put the pieces together and make sense of the timeline and prove what happened. But you cannot undo it. You cannot bring someone back. You cannot give a family the ending they deserve. All you can do is make sure the truth does not stay buried. And sometimes that has to be enough. I still drive past the building sometimes. It looks the same. The lights on the second floor still stay on late. The parking lot still fills up during the day and empties out at night. The alley is still narrow the months after the trial was strange. Quiet. I had spent so long chasing this case, building the timeline, pulling threads, that when it was over, I did not know what to do with the space it left behind. I kept going back to the files, reading through the transcripts, looking at the photos, trying to see if I had missed anything. I had not. The case was solid, but something still bothered me. It was the storage unit, specifically the dates on that handwritten list they found in Milner's lockbox. Most of them matched up with known events. The night Caroline disappeared, the times Milner went to the storage unit, the day he purchased the tarp. But there were 3 dates that did not fit. They were earlier, months before Caroline sent that email, months before the accusation started. I pulled the list from the evidence file and studied it. The first date was April 9th. Next to it, Milner had written a time, 8:15, and a location, second floor break room. The second date was May 23rd. Same location. The third was July 7th. This time, the location was different. It just said parking lot. I did not know what they meant, but I could not let it go. I went back to Ray Curran, the maintenance supervisor. I asked if he remembered anything unusual happening on those dates. He looked at his work logs. He said April 9th was a Monday. He said he remembered that day because there had been a small water leak in the second floor break room. He had gone up to fix it around 8 in the morning. He said when he got there, the door was propped open and the floor was wet. He thought someone had spilled coffee. He cleaned it up and fixed the leak. He said it was not a big deal. I asked if he saw anyone in the area. He said no, but he remembered finding something in the trash can. A broken coffee mug. He said it looked like it had been smashed deliberately. The pieces were too clean, too scattered. He threw it away and did not think about it again. I asked about May 23rd. He checked his logs again. He said that was the day someone reported a foul smell in the second floor hallway. He went up to investigate. He said it was coming from the break room trash. He said someone had thrown away food that had been sitting there for days. He replaced the bag and sprayed air freshener. He said it was not unusual. People did that sometimes. July 7th, he did not have a record of. He said nothing came up in his logs. I asked if he remembered anything happening in the parking lot that day. He said no. I thanked him and left. I still did not know what the dates meant, but the fact that two of them were tied to the second floor break room, the same area where Ray had left his master keys unattended, made me uneasy. I went back to the building manager and asked if I could review the tenant logs for those dates. She pulled up the records. She said on April 9th, 5 people had swiped into the building before 9 in the morning. Milner was one of them. Caroline was another. The others were employees from the first floor. On May 23rd, the log showed similar activity. Milner, Caroline, and a few others. Nothing unusual. July 7th was different. That day was a Saturday. The building was officially closed. But the log showed 2 swipes, one at 7:43 in the morning, one at 8:51. Both were Milner's keycard. I asked the building manager if it was normal for Milner to come in on weekends. She said some tenants worked weekends, but it was not common. She said Milner had swiped in on Saturdays a handful of times over the years, but never that early. I asked if anyone else had swiped in that day. She said no. Just Milner. Twice. I asked if the system ever malfunctioned, if it ever recorded duplicate swipes. She said it was possible, but rare. She said the system logged every swipe with a timestamp and a door location. If there were 2 swipes, it meant someone used their card twice. I asked if she could tell me which doors Milner used. She pulled up the detailed log. She said the first swipe was at the front entrance at 7:43. The second swipe was at the back entrance at 8:51. That meant Milner entered through the front, stayed in the building for over an hour, then exited through the back. I asked if the back entrance led to the alley. She said yes. I felt the shape of something forming, but I could not see it clearly yet. I went back to the security footage archives. The building manager had said the system only kept recordings for 90 days, but I asked if there was any way to recover older footage. She said the security company might have backups. She gave me their contact information. I called the company. They said they kept backup footage for a year, but accessing it required a formal request and a fee. I paid the fee and submitted the request. 2 weeks later, they sent me a hard drive with archive footage from April through July. I went through it methodically. I started with April 9th. The parking lot camera showed Milner arriving at 7:52 in the morning. He walked into the building carrying a briefcase. At 8:23, the camera showed Caroline arriving. She parked, walked to the entrance, and went inside. At 8:41, Milner came back out. He was not carrying the briefcase. He walked to his car, opened the trunk, and put something inside. The angle did not show what it was. He closed the trunk, got in his car, and left. Caroline did not leave until after 5 that evening. I moved on to May 23rd. Similar pattern. Milner arrived early. Caroline arrived later. Milner left mid-morning. Caroline stayed until evening. July 7th was the one that stopped me. The footage showed Milner arriving at 7:43, just like the log said. He parked near the back of the lot, away from the main entrance. He got out of his car and walked toward the building. He was carrying a large duffel bag. He went inside. At 8:51, the back entrance camera, the one that faced the alley, showed the door opening. Milner stepped out. He was no longer carrying the duffel bag. He walked quickly to his car, got in, and drove away. I rewound and watched it again. The duffel bag was gone. He had left it inside the building. I pulled the tenant logs for the following Monday, July 10th. Caroline's key card showed she swiped in at 8:37 that morning. She swiped out at 6:14 that evening. Normal day. But on July 11th, her swipe out time was different. She left at 4:49. Early for her. I cross-referenced her work calendar, which had been part of the evidence file. She had no meetings that afternoon, no appointments, no noted reason to leave early. I did not know what it meant, but I knew it was connected. I went back to Caroline's family. Her sister Amy had been the primary contact throughout the investigation. She had sat through the entire trial. She had answered every question I had ever asked. I called and asked if I could meet with her one more time. She agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where I had met Caroline's former supervisor. Amy looked older than she had at the trial. Tired, but she said she was glad the case was closed. She said it did not bring Caroline back, but at least they knew what happened. At least Milner was in prison. I said I had a few follow-up questions. I said I was trying to understand the timeline leading up to Caroline's disappearance. I asked if Amy remembered Caroline mentioning anything unusual happening at work in the months before. Specifically, April, May, or July. Amy thought for a while. Then she said Caroline had mentioned something in the spring. She said Caroline had told her that someone at work was making her uncomfortable. She said Caroline did not give details, but she said it was not overt. It was more like a feeling, like someone was watching her, like someone was paying too much attention. I asked if Caroline said who. Amy said no. She said Caroline brushed it off. She said she thought she was being paranoid. She said she was under a lot of stress at work and probably reading too much into things. I asked if Caroline ever mentioned Milner specifically. Amy said yes, but only later. She said in September, Caroline told her she had discovered some irregularities in his billing and was planning to report it. She said Caroline seemed nervous about it. She said Caroline told her that Milner had been acting strange around her, avoiding her in the hallways, not making eye contact. She said Caroline thought he knew she was on to him. I asked if Caroline ever said she felt threatened. Amy said no. She said Caroline never used that word. But she said looking back, the way Caroline talked about it, the way she seemed tense whenever his name came up, it was clear she was worried. I thanked Amy and left. I sat in my car for a long time, thinking. The dates, the break room, the duffel bag, the feeling of being watched. I went back to Liz Howe's statement. She had said her relationship with Milner started 8 months before Caroline disappeared. That would have been February, But the dates on Milner's list went back further. April, May, July. What if the relationship with Liz was not the beginning? What if it was the middle? I pulled Milner's financial records again. I went through his credit card statements month by month. In April, there was a charge at a photography supply store. In May, another charge at an electronics retailer. In July, a charge at a sporting goods store. I called the stores and asked if they kept purchase records from that far back. 2 of them did. I requested copies. The photography store charge was for a small digital camera, the kind you could hide easily. The electronics retailer charge was for a wireless storage device, the kind used for backing up files remotely. The sporting goods store charge was for binoculars. I felt sick. I went back to the building and walked the 2nd floor. I looked at the break room. I looked at the hallway. I looked at the sight lines. From the break room, you could see directly into Caroline's office if her door was open. From the hallway, you could see her desk through the frosted glass panel. I checked the ceiling tiles in the break room. One of them was loose. I pulled it down. There was nothing there now, but there were scratches on the metal frame, like something had been clipped to it and then removed. I called Carver. I told him what I had found. He said he would look into it. He said the case was already closed, but if there was evidence of additional crimes, they would investigate. 2 weeks later, he called me back. He said they had re-examined Milner's seized computer. They had found a hidden partition on the hard drive. Inside were folders labeled by date. April, May, June, July, August, September. Each folder contained photos and videos, hundreds of them. They were surveillance images. Caroline at her desk, Caroline in the break room, Caroline walking to her car, Caroline leaving the building. The photos were taken from a distance, zoomed in, framed carefully. Some of them were taken through her office window from the parking lot. Others were taken from inside the building. Carver said the timestamps on the files matched the dates on Milner's list. He said the earliest images were from April. The most recent were from late September, 2 weeks before Caroline disappeared. He said there were also videos, short clips, Caroline working, Caroline on the phone, Caroline eating lunch. None of them had sound. None of them showed anything illegal. But taken together, they painted a clear picture. Milner had been stalking her for months. Carver said they also found search history on the computer, queries about how to delete files permanently, how to avoid detection on security cameras, how to stage a suicide. The searches dated back to late August. He said the DA was considering additional charges: stalking, harassment, invasion of privacy. But Milner was already serving 35 years. Carver said adding more charges would not change much. It would not bring Caroline back. It would not undo what he did. But it mattered. It mattered because it showed that this was not just a confrontation that went wrong. It was not just a panicked reaction to being accused of fraud. It was calculated. It was obsessive. It was predatory. Milner had been watching Caroline for months. He had been documenting her. He had been planning. And when she finally confronted him, when she finally said she was going to report him, he did not just panic. He acted. I do not know when it started. I do not know what triggered it. Maybe it was something Caroline said in passing. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Maybe it was nothing at all. Maybe he just decided she was someone he could control, someone he could manipulate, someone he could silence. But Caroline was not someone who could be silenced. She saw the fraud. She documented it. She confronted him. And when he tried to intimidate her, she did not back down. She told him she had records. She told him she was going to the compliance board. She gave him a deadline. And he killed her for it. I gave the new evidence to Amy. I did not want to. I did not want her to know that her sister had been watched, that her privacy had been violated for months before she died. But I thought she deserved to know the full truth. Amy read through the summary I had written. She did not cry. She just sat there, staring at the pages. Then she said, "He was obsessed with her." I said yes. She said, "And no one noticed." I said, "No one knew what to look for." She said, "Caroline knew. She felt it. She told me someone was watching her. And I told her she was being paranoid." I said, "You could not have known." She said, "I should have listened." There was nothing I could say to that, so I just sat with her until she was ready to leave. The case is closed now, for real this time. Milner is in prison. Liz is gone. Caroline is buried. The building still stands. The offices are still rented. Life goes on. But I think about this case differently now. I used to think it was about fraud, about money, about a man who panicked when he got caught. But it was not about that. It was about control. It was about a man who decided that a woman's life belonged to him, that her time, her space, her autonomy were his to monitor and manage. And when she resisted, when she asserted her right to hold him accountable, he took everything from her. That is what this case is really about. Not the locked office, not the open window, not the key card in the alley. It is about the months before, the surveillance, the obsession, the entitlement, the belief that he could take what he wanted and destroy anyone who got in his way. And it is about the fact that he almost got away with it. If Ray had not found the key card, if Angela had not remembered the footsteps, if the security footage had been deleted, if I had not kept pulling threads, he would still be free. Caroline would still be missing, and no one would know the truth. That is the part that keeps me awake. Not what happened, but what almost did not. I kept working cases after that. Cold files, unsolved disappearances, suspicious deaths that were never properly investigated. But every time I opened a new folder, I thought about Caroline. I thought about the months she spent being watched without knowing it. I thought about the moment she finally confronted Milner, not realizing how dangerous he had become. I thought about all the small decisions that led to that night. The emails she sent, the meetings she arranged, the choice to stay late on a Friday when the building was nearly empty. None of those decisions were wrong. She was doing her job. She was standing up for what was right. But they cost her everything. 6 months after the trial, I got a call from a journalist working on a story about workplace safety and corporate accountability. She had read about Caroline's case and wanted to interview me. She asked if I thought Caroline's death could have been prevented. I said yes. I said if her employer had taken her concerns seriously, if they had investigated Milner's billing immediately instead of sitting on it, if they had installed proper security cameras in the hallways, if they had created a system where employees could report harassment and surveillance without fear of retaliation, Caroline might still be alive. The journalist asked if I thought the company bore any responsibility. I said legally, probably not, but morally, yes. I said they had an obligation to protect their employees, and they failed. The story ran a few weeks later. It included interviews with Caroline's family, former co-workers, and workplace safety advocates. It highlighted the gaps in the building security, the lack of response to Caroline's initial concerns, and the broader issue of how companies handle internal complaints. The company that employed Caroline released a statement. They expressed sympathy for the family. They said they had reviewed their policies and implemented new safety measures. They said they were committed to ensuring nothing like this ever happened again. I do not know if that is true. I hope it is. But I have seen enough of these cases to know that policies do not always translate into action, that safety measures get ignored when they are inconvenient, that complaints get buried when they threaten the wrong people. Caroline's case became a reference point. Other journalists started looking into similar situations, cases where employees had disappeared or been harmed after reporting misconduct, cases where warning signs had been ignored, cases where the people who were supposed to protect victims had looked the other way. I was contacted by families, by advocates, by attorneys working on civil suits. They wanted to know how I had built the case against Milner. They wanted to know what evidence had made the difference. They wanted to know if their cases could be solved too. I helped when I could. I shared what I had learned. I walked them through the process. I explained how to request records, how to analyze timelines, how to identify inconsistencies in witness statements. I told them it was slow work, frustrating work, work that did not always lead to answers. But I also told them it mattered, that even when a case stayed cold, even when the evidence was not enough, the act of looking, of refusing to let someone be forgotten, was important. One of the families I worked with was looking for a woman named Rachel Cortez. She had disappeared 3 years earlier after filing a harassment complaint against her supervisor. The police had investigated briefly, concluded she had left voluntarily, and closed the case. Her family did not believe it. They said Rachel would never have left without telling them. They said she had been scared in the weeks before she disappeared. They said she had told her sister that someone was following her. I reviewed the case file. It was thin. A missing person report. A few interviews with co-workers who said Rachel had seemed stressed, but fine. A note from the lead detective saying there was no evidence of foul play. But when I pulled the harassment complaint Rachel had filed, I saw something familiar. The supervisor she had accused was a man named Kenneth Pryor. He ran a small logistics company. Rachel had worked there as a dispatcher. She had reported that Pryor made inappropriate comments, showed up at her apartment unannounced, and sent her messages late at night. The company had conducted an internal review and found the complaint unsubstantiated. Rachel had been told to drop it or find another job. 2 weeks later, she was gone. I started pulling the same threads I had pulled in Caroline's case. Phone records, financial records, surveillance footage. I found that Pryor's car had been seen near Rachel's apartment multiple times in the weeks before she disappeared. I found that his cell phone had pinged towers near her home late at night. I found that he had purchased cleaning supplies and trash bags the day after she was reported missing. I took it to the police. They reopened the case. They brought Pryor in for questioning. He denied everything. He said he had never been to Rachel's apartment. He said the phone records were a coincidence. He said he did not know what happened to her. They searched his property. They found nothing. The case stalled. But Rachel's sister did not give up. She kept pressing. She kept asking questions. She kept looking. And a year later, a hiker found human remains in a wooded area 20 miles from Rachel's last known location. The medical examiner confirmed it was Rachel. The cause of death was strangulation. Pryor was arrested. He was charged with murder. The case went to trial. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough. The phone records, the surveillance footage, the cleaning supplies, the timeline. The jury convicted him. He was sentenced to life without parole. Rachel's sister called me after the sentencing. She said thank you. She said without my help, Rachel would still be missing. She said at least now they could bury her. At least now they knew. I told her I was sorry it took so long. She said it did not matter. She said what mattered was that someone cared enough to keep looking. I think about that a lot. The act of looking. The refusal to let a case go cold. To let a person become a statistic. To let the truth stay buried. It does not always work. Sometimes the evidence is gone. Sometimes the witnesses are dead. Sometimes the people who know what happened will never talk. But sometimes, if you pull the right thread, if you ask the right question, if you find the one piece that does not fit, the whole thing unravels. That is what happened with Caroline. The key card in the alley was the first thread. The stairwell footage was the second. The voice recording was the third. And once those threads were pulled, the rest came apart. Milner had built a careful lie. He had staged the scene. He had wiped the phone. He had buried the body. He had hidden the evidence. He had convinced his wife, his mistress, and himself that he could get away with it. But he could not account for everything. He could not account for Ray finding the key card before the rain washed it away. He could not account for Angela remembering the footsteps. He could not account for the voice memo still being recoverable from Caroline's phone. He could not account for the fact that someone would care enough to keep looking. That is the lesson I took from this case. Not that justice is inevitable. It is not. But that persistence matters. That asking uncomfortable questions matters. That refusing to accept easy answers matters. Caroline deserved that. Rachel deserved that. Every person who disappears, every person whose death is written off as an accident or a suicide or a voluntary departure, deserves someone who will look closely, who will ask why, who will not stop until the truth is found. I do not do this work because I think I can save everyone. I cannot. I do it because I think the truth matters, because I think accountability matters, because I think the people who do harm should not be allowed to walk away clean. Milner is in prison now. He will be there for the rest of his life. He will never hurt anyone again. But that does not undo what he did. It does not bring Caroline back. It does not give her family the years they lost. It does not erase the fear she felt in those final moments. All it does is make sure he does not get away with it. And sometimes that has to be enough. I still drive past the building sometimes. It has new tenants now. The second floor has been renovated. The offices have been repainted. The security cameras have been upgraded. The building manager is different. Ray retired. Angela moved her practice to a different part of town. But when I look up at that window, I still see it. The night Caroline disappeared. The open window. The locked door. The wet carpet. The rain. I see the moment when everything went wrong. The moment when a man decided his reputation was worth more than a woman's life. The moment when he made a choice that destroyed everything. And I see the long, slow work of pulling it all back into the light, thread by thread, question by question, until the truth could not be hidden anymore. That is the work. That is what it takes. And that is what I will keep doing, case after case, for as long as I can. Because the truth matters. Because accountability matters. Because the people who are gone deserve to be remembered. And the people who took them deserve to be held responsible. That is Caroline's legacy. Not the way she died, but the fact that someone kept looking until the truth was found. And that is what I want you to remember. Not just this case, but all of them. Every missing person, every unsolved death, every cold file sitting in a cabinet somewhere, waiting for someone to care enough to open it. They are not just cases, they are people. They had lives, they had families, they had futures, and they deserve the truth. That is why this work matters. That is why I do it. And that is why I will keep doing it, no matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how many threads I have to pull before something finally unravels. Because in the end, the truth is the only thing that lasts, the only thing that matters, the only thing that can bring any kind of closure, any kind of peace, any kind of justice. Caroline Drexler deserved the truth. And now, finally, she has it.